Hello, everybody. Today I bring you another one of my, shall we say, experiments in format for the channel. This I'm calling Fast Controversies. This is not going to be a replacement for my long form videos. This is not going to be the new brand of the channel or anything else like that. But I thought I might do some of these videos every now and then for when things come up that I wanted to talk about. That go along to supplement something that I think is important when talking about history and historical narratives. These aren't going to be react videos as such. I don't plan to do react videos, not because I don't like react videos. In fact, vlogging through history is one of my favorite channels. Go check his stuff out if you want to. But it's because I just don't really want to get into that game. It's already got some big names in it, and I don't want to just be another person out there who is saying more or less the same things in a lot of instances. But today we're going to talk about this post right here. And I kept the post intact to give credit to the original page that had posted this. But this is about Vikings, and specifically the third season of the new Viking series. I feel a little weird beating up on Vikings because, of course, Vikings has never really had that much detail to historical accuracy or historical authenticity. That's not to say it is a bad show. So there are three aspects that I use to evaluate historical media, or media that's set in historical times. The first is accuracy, the second is authenticity, and the third one is communicating concepts to a modern audience. And I think Vikings does a very good job on that third one, even though they're pretty sketchy with those other two. And then in particular, there have been plenty of comments in the past about Vikings' inaccuracy with representing clothing, talking a lot about leather biker armor. But even with the leather biker armor of past seasons for a lot of the characters, I think that works for the show because what they're attempting to communicate through that to modern audiences is a sort of edginess and outsiderness of these characters, which of course is best represented through leather styling and biker gear and goth-looking clothing and stuff like that. And this can be a very effective tool when something more accurate to the period or something that's more authentic doesn't really quite work because you're trying to communicate to the audience something that would not pass over, would not come across correctly if you're trying to communicate using something that's more authentic. So if our Vikings were just dressed up in woolen tunics and furs, that seems very classical and quaint, which of course is the opposite of what you're trying to portray with these characters. Baz Luhrmann in The Great Gatsby and also in Moulin Rouge uses this very effectively with music. He uses very modern-sounding music to communicate how modern this would have felt to the characters, to communicate that to the audience. Using more period-accurate music, although he does use some, including in The Great Gatsby, and the most famous memeable scene in Great Gatsby uses Rhapsody in Blue, but that still he makes good use of more modern sounding music in certain moments in that film to communicate the cutting edge nature of what's going on to the audience and to get something across. That's where I think a lot of Gatsby adaptations have failed in the past because they put so much emphasis into trying to surround the viewer with the sort of richness and ambiance of this time period that they create this certain trad nostalgia, which was the exact opposite of what the book was trying to communicate. The book was not trying to make people have warm feelings about America during this time period. But that's sort of what ends up being communicated. People look back on Gatsby with these sort of nostalgia goggles, and what they take away from the narrative is sort of almost more a narrative of a better time, a simpler time, which, of course, as I said, is the exact opposite of what the book was going for. And I mean, you have to remember that a lot of adaptations of Gatsby weren't recent. They were put out when the Depression, the New Deal, and everything else like that in this time period were within living memory. Which, to be clear, I'm someone who loves social history and I love living history, and I really get into this type of stuff and appreciate it. But if my Facebook and YouTube algorithms tell me anything, unfortunately, a lot of the people who are generally drawn to this type of thing are more acting out of the sense that they have that there was an idealized past that we have somehow gotten away from. And of course, that leads back into these other points. But anyway, even in terms of just the immersive aspects of history, this doesn't do it for me. This doesn't work. This does not effectively communicate anything to the audience other than this is Rome, and this is 1,000 years off of the mark of what a member of high society, high Roman society would have looked like during the Byzantine period. And whatever, that would be one thing. But for the fact that I think this helps to reinforce a lot of damaging narratives that come out of flawed narratives of history. As I'd said in my first video, bad audio and all, I guess I never really answered the question. I had a good mic for that video. The audio is awful because I didn't understand the software yet, and so I had the software connected to the wrong microphone. That's what happened there. Sorry, everybody. But if you can tough through that and go back to my first video, as I had said back then, people who want to make some sort of a case about today, they want a good narrative for today, and they want to reach back into historical narratives to get that point that they're trying to get across. Oftentimes, we'll look back to history and see cultures as not changing, not progressing, civilizations as the growth of civilization, the life of a civilization being a zero-sum game. One civilization ends, another civilization begins. One empire ends, another empire begins, or you get the fractured pieces until something new comes up. And so they look for these clean lines and these clean breaks. And Rome is the quintessential poster child for bad narratives that a lot of folks who are trying to make small c conservative arguments about history and institutions within government and their importance, but then also capital F far right arguments, very reactionary and regressive arguments. They all go back to Rome. And this period in Rome where we have this kind of armor and general style, that was a very small period of Roman history. We're talking like a couple hundred years in basically what was, for at least the Western Empire, 1,000-year history. If you include the Eastern Empire in there, and that's not even including, my first video I talked about how the continuity between the Ottomans and the Byzantine emperors, but if you include the Eastern Empire in there, it's like a 2,000-year-long history, and there were a lot of stylistic and cultural and language changes during that period. It was not one thing. Society is constantly evolving. There is no Roman ethos. There is no American ethos. There is no Roman morals. There are no American morals. There's no fashion, dress, institutions. It's all stuff that's constantly changing, constantly evolving. society and culture are always moving forward. It's another area that I have a lot of interest in is historical linguistics, and a lot of both pedants and also, as I said, small c conservatives, but then a lot of really hardcore reactionary folks. They always point to language as being a decline. Now that's proof that the culture is declining. But if you look at the history, language is changing all of the time. In fact, writing is much slower to change. Writing is not language. My English teacher friends always get really pissed off when I tell them this. But writing is not language. It is a visual representation of language, and oftentimes a very inaccurate one at that. Spoken language is in a constant period of flux, and written language is oftentimes running to catch up, although in recent years, with text messages becoming more prevalent, that running to catch up, that gap is closed quite a bit. But people are always looking for these signs that a culture is declining, and so we think of the golden age of Rome to be basically between Caesar, Julius Caesar, and Caesar Augustus, and then maybe through like the emperors of that period, of the Augustinian lineage, and then after that it's all decline. Rome is all in decline after that, and so people cling on to that period as being the Roman ethos, but they ignore the long lead up to that, and then they ignore what came after that. And so, like for instance, this is what a 4th century Roman soldier would have looked like. So you can see how much change has happened in that time period, just from the height of it, from let's say 100 A.D. To the 4th century. But because we tend to think of stages of rise and decline and then collapse and then fall, instead of the reality of the matter, which is that these are all currents that are constantly converging to each other. Society, culture, clothing, everything else like that is constantly evolving. That's actually the sign of a healthy society, when those things are evolving. That translates over to us as though this is a lesser thing, and so we don't want to portray our Byzantines, who are 600 years on, as being even lesser than that. We want to portray them as being like the height of Rome. We want to go along with these 19th century narratives that this way of dressing, this way of speaking, etc., that conveys Roman dominance. Because we all know that after this period was over, after the period of the Golden Age was over, Rome was no longer dominant. Completely false, by the way. Go and read into the crisis of the 3rd century and all of the problems that Rome had, how it was unraveling, and then recovered over that period, and then got to go on for another, well, if you only want to talk about the Western Empire, got to go on for another 150 years, 200 years, and that's only if you put the hard break at when Rome is sacked, as opposed to seeing the Western kingdoms that came out of that as oftentimes continuations of the Roman Empire. That's for that. We're not even talking about the East here, but it went on for almost 10 generations after that. Think about that. We condense timelines so much. And when we do that, and we think of everything as being in rise or decline, in a golden age or not in a golden age, it's strong or weak, as opposed to seeing these as streams, as currents, as rivers, as I said, then we tend to think of this guy here, this Roman who's not dressed like the traditional Roman, this soldier here, well, he's weak. That represents a weakness. That's not, that's kind of the instinctive reaction to this, because he doesn't look like the pristine image that we have in our heads of dominance. And again, this is 600 years before what is portrayed in the Viking series. I am interjecting this in post because I'd intended to bring this up in the main part of my talk, but then I breezed over it in my notes. This gentleman's longsword and the chainmail armor under the padding is actually a sign of technological progress, not technological regress. See, longswords during the classical and late antiquity period are oftentimes seen as though they were regressive by a lot of people because the early Romans didn't have them. Rome was in decline, so this must be a regressive thing. And plus, all the barbarians had long swords, and we know that they were the defeated peoples. But the longsword here and the chainmail are actually signs of technological progress, as I had said. This is a more advanced technology than what the Romans had during the classical period. The Romans during the classical period were actually very poor iron workers compared to a lot of other civilizations. They picked up techniques from people that they had conquered from and assimilated that made their ironworking skills better as time went on. But those short swords were not the height of technology. This longer sword is much more technologically advanced. So back to the main segment. And when we finally get, we have 600 more years of development, 600 more years of change. I'm flashing some images here up on the screen right now to show how the style has changed during that time period, but there was a lot that changed, and it's just unfortunate that we fall back on this because, again, ruin value, seeing civilizations as being either in rise or decline, weak or strong, these clear cutoff points. It communicates ideas about history that fall very conveniently into very reactionary, very small c conservative sometimes, although of course being a small c conservative isn't as bad as being a fascist. I'm not trying to say that at all, but it does conform with these narratives of history and helps fuel a lot of these narratives that are then applied to today. And so that's why I don't like this. That's my issue with it. It just doesn't. It's not authentic. It's not accurate, and I don't think it communicates something worthwhile to the audience. But that's my video for today. Please leave comments. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you think that maybe I'm looking a bit too much into things, then that's fine. I understand. I am. If I didn't sometimes think too hard about things, then I wouldn't have this channel. But there are additional videos that are going to be coming up soon. I'm kind of on the fence about whether I want to do the Normandy video that I started doing work on, or if I wanted to do the video on the concept of Whig history, which in some ways would kind of be a companion to this video, because it's very similar topics in a lot of ways, although Whig history is more of, again, a small L liberal view of history, but it contains a lot of weirdly conservative elements, especially in the way that's been bent over the years, even though it's a format for history that is oftentimes preferred by, again, small L liberals and sort of centrist types. But I nonetheless would like your input on that. What would you guys like to see? If you give me some comments, I'll be happy to go in either direction because I've done work on both of them. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day. Take care. And again, like and subscribe.